I never thought a simple playground accident would destroy my entire life. But when my husband called me that afternoon, his voice shaking, I knew something was wrong. Mac, what's Tyler's blood type again? My heart stopped. 12 years of secrets, lies, and carefully crafted deception, all undone by a single routine blood test. I tried to explain, he wouldn't listen. And that was the last time I ever saw him. Mark and I had what most people would call the perfect marriage. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. We had the big house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, 3 beautiful kids, Tyler, Mason, and little Emma, and a life that most women would envy. I was 20 when I met Mark. He was 6 years older, already building his own contracting business, and had this confidence about him that made me feel safe. When he proposed, I didn't hesitate. He was stable, responsible, and most importantly, he loved me unconditionally. Our early years were blissful. We'd stay up late talking about our future, dreaming about all the things we'd build together. He worked long hours, but I didn't mind. I was proud of him. I was proud of us. Then life happened. Mark's business took off, and with that came longer hours, late nights, and weekends spent at job sites instead of home. I went from being his priority to an afterthought, the wife he kissed on the forehead before leaving at dawn. He wasn't neglectful, he provided for us, he loved our kids, but I started feeling invisible. Loneliness crept in slowly. At first, I filled the void with mom groups, yoga classes, and wine nights with neighbors. But eventually, I wanted something more. Something that made me feel alive again. That's when it started. The first time was an accident, or at least, that's what I told myself. A flirtatious exchange at the gym turned into something more, and once I crossed that line, it was easier to do it again. I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. Mark was too busy to notice, and as long as I kept everything under control, what harm was there? He had his work. I had my secrets. When I got pregnant with Tyler, the timeline was close enough that I let Mark believe he was the father. He was so overjoyed, I didn't have the heart to shatter that moment. Then Mason came. Then Emma. Each time I told myself I'd stop. But I never did. For 12 years, I played the role of the perfect wife and mother, burying my secrets beneath PTA meetings and family vacations. And it would have stayed that way forever, if it weren't for that one phone call. I had spent 12 years keeping everything under control, every lie perfectly in place, every detail carefully managed. I handled all the medical forms, made sure Mark never had a reason to question anything. But deep down, I always knew that if he ever looked too closely, the truth would unravel. And now he was looking. That night after the phone call, Mark came home late. I expected an explosion, screaming accusations, but instead there was silence. He acted completely normal, too normal. He tucked the kids in, kissed them goodnight, and then sat across from me at the dinner table, eating in absolute silence. No eye contact, no conversation, just the steady sound of his fork against the plate. I could barely swallow my food. I wanted to say something to explain, but what could I say? That it was all a misunderstanding. That the hospital had made a mistake. He wasn't stupid. That night I barely slept. Mark was beside me in bed, but his body was stiff, rigid like a stranger. He knew something. The next few days were torture. Mark started watching me, really watching me. He asked questions he had never asked before. Hey, why don't I have copies of the kids' medical records? I was thinking, maybe we should do a full family health check, just to be safe. Remind me again, when was Tyler conceived? Every question felt like a landmine. I danced around my answers, tried to sound casual, but I could feel him digging. And then, I noticed little things going missing. Important documents from my filing cabinet gone. The kids' baby albums, hospital records, even old ultrasound photos. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I saw it. One night, after Mark thought I was asleep, I watched him from the bedroom doorway as he sat in his office, flipping through papers. I couldn't see what they were, but I knew. He was putting the pieces together. I wanted to stop him, to say something, anything, but it was too late. The doubt had already poisoned his mind. Then one evening, Tyler came to me frowning. "Mom, why is Dad acting weird?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean, baby?" "I don't know, he's just quiet. He doesn't talk to me like he used to." And that's when I knew I wasn't just losing Mark. I was losing everything. The house didn't feel like home anymore. Mark barely spoke to me, but his silence was louder than any argument we had ever had. The way he moved, the way he looked at me, it was different now. Like he was studying me, dissecting every word, every gesture. And the worst part, I knew he was close to the truth. I was running out of time. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my morning coffee, when Mark casually placed a manila envelope in front of me. My stomach flipped before I even opened it. Inside were printed emails, my old messages, my deleted messages, private ones, ones I never thought anyone would see. There it was in black and white. My flirty exchanges, late-night rendezvous, secret meetups at hotels and apartments. I slammed the envelope shut. My hands trembled as I looked up at Mark. "Where did you get these?" My voice came out weaker than I wanted it to. "It doesn't matter," he said, his tone cold. Of course it mattered. I had been so careful. Burner phones, deleting messages, changing passwords, but somehow he found a way in. My heart pounded. I needed to stay calm. Think lie. "Mark eyes." "Don't," he interrupted, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. His eyes burned into me. He wasn't just angry, he was hurt, and that was worse. "Tell me the truth, Mac." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because I knew the truth would destroy us. The tension was unbearable. Mark stopped sleeping in our bed. Some nights, he stayed in his office, other nights, he didn't come home at all. When I asked where he was, he just stared at me until I gave up. The kids noticed. Tyler barely spoke at dinner. Mason kept his head down. And Emma, sweet Emma, just kept asking, "When will Daddy smile again?" I was losing control. I needed a way out. One last lie. One desperate attempt to fix this before he uncovered everything. So I made a plan. I waited until the weekend, made his favorite dinner, wore the dress he always loved, and tried to remind him of us, the life we built, the love we once had. I reached for his hand across the table. "Mark, please, let's just talk." For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, pain, maybe even longing. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. "You want to talk," he said, voice hollow. "Okay, let's talk about the DNA tests I ordered." My breath caught in my throat. "The what?" "You heard me." He leaned forward, his voice deadly calm. "I sent them in last week, should be getting the results soon." Every muscle in my body locked. My hands clenched under the table. This was it. My worst fear was about to become reality. The truth was coming. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. The house felt like a ticking time bomb. Every second that passed, I knew we were inching closer to the explosion. And then it happened. It was a Friday evening when Mark walked in. The kids were in the living room watching TV, and I was pretending to scroll through my phone at the kitchen counter. But my eyes weren't on the screen. They were on the envelope in his hand. I knew what it was before he even spoke. He walked straight past me and placed it gently on the table, his movements eerily calm, too calm. "Open it," he said. My fingers felt numb as I reached for the envelope. My body already knew what was inside. The moment I pulled out the papers, the words DNA paternity test RESULTS screamed at me from the page. One for Tyler. One for Mason. One for Emma. I couldn't breathe. Mark crossed his arms and leaned against the counter, waiting, watching. I forced my eyes to scan the first line. Probability of paternity, 0%. It was like being punched in the chest. I swallowed hard, flipping to the next one. Probability of paternity, 0%. And the next. Probability of paternity, 0%. 3 kids. Not one of them was his. A sharp, strangled breath escaped me. I clutched the counter to keep myself upright. My vision blurred. Mark, I started, but he cut me off. Don't, his voice was dangerously low, controlled. His hands were shaking though, I saw that. 12 years, Mac, he whispered. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the family photos on the wall. The ones where he stood proudly next to our children, beaming, believing they were his. 12 years, and you let me believe I was their father. His voice cracked on the last word. I opened my mouth, searching for the right words, but there weren't any. There was nothing I could say to fix this. Were you ever going to tell me? I hesitated, and that was my mistake. Because in that silence, Mark got his answer. His jaw clenched. He took a deep, shaky breath before shoving the papers back into the envelope and folding it carefully like it was something sacred. I'm leaving, he said, voice flat. The words slammed into me like a freight train. Number Mark, please. I reached for him, but he stepped back like my touch burned him. Don't, his eyes finally met mine, cold, unforgiving. I can't even look at you. Then he turned and walked out of the room. The next hour was a blur. Mark moved through the house silently, gathering his things. I followed him, begging, pleading, but he ignored me. Mark, please, let's talk about this. We can figure this out. You're still their dad, you've raised them their whole lives. That made him stop. He turned, his expression unreadable. Then, he said the words that broke me. They were never mine. I felt my knees buckle. Mark, don't do this to them, I whispered. Please, don't do this to them. His face twisted, like he was in pain. You did this to them. And then, he walked out the front door. I ran after him, barefoot, sobbing. He got into his truck, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His shoulders started shaking. He was crying. But he never looked back. He started the engine. I pounded on the window, screaming his name, begging him not to leave. But he just wiped his face, put the truck in drive, and pulled away. And just like that, he was gone. I don't know how long I stood in the driveway. Long enough for the neighbors to start peeking out their windows. Long enough for the kids to come outside, their faces filled with confusion. Mom, where's Dad going? Tyler asked. I couldn't answer. Because for the first time in 12 years, I had no control anymore. The house felt different without Mark. Empty, hollow, like the air itself had changed. That first night, I kept expecting him to walk back through the door, to come storming in, demanding answers, shouting anything. But he didn't. He was really gone. The kids didn't understand at first. Mom, when is Dad coming home? Emma asked the next morning, rubbing her sleepy eyes. He's on a trip, baby, I lied, another lie. But this one wasn't to protect myself. This one was to protect them. The days blurred together. Mark didn't call, he didn't text. The kids asked about him every single day, and every time I made up excuses. Daddy's really busy with work. He just needs a little time. He loves you so much. All of it was true, except for the part where he was coming back. Because I didn't know if he ever would. And then the rumors started. At first, it was just whispers. Side glances at school drop-off, hushed conversations that stopped the second I walked by. Then, Mark's sister Ashley made a post on Facebook. I can't believe what my brother has been put through. Some women destroy lives without a second thought. Some secrets are too sick to forgive. It had hundreds of comments within hours. People speculating, guessing, judging. Then, someone posted the DNA results. And my world exploded. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, calls, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Is it true? How could you do this to him? I always knew there was something off about you. Even my own parents turned against me. My mother called, her voice sharp and filled with disgust. How could you do this to those bobbies, to Mark? Mom, please. We raised you better than this, Mackenzie. She hung up. Then the financial fallout hit. Mark froze our bank accounts, cut off the credit cards. I went to the grocery store one morning and my card was declined. I called the bank in a panic. Ma'am, your husband removed your authorization from the account. I felt my stomach drop. Mark wasn't just leaving me, he was making sure I suffered. That night I dug through the bills. Mortgage, school tuition, credit card statements, it was all under his name. He had all the power and now I had nothing. Then the worst part. Tyler found the DNA results. I had hidden them away, shoved them deep in my drawer, but he must have been looking for answers. I walked into his room and saw him sitting on the bed, the papers in his lap, his face pale. Mom, his voice shook. What is this? I felt sick. Baby, it's not what you think. So it's not true, he interrupted, eyes filling with tears. I couldn't answer. And in that silence, he understood everything. He screamed at me, called me a liar, a manipulator. Then he stormed out of the room. I heard the front door slam. He ran straight to Mark's sister's house. And he never came back. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The divorce papers came in the mail. No negotiations, no discussions, just a clean break. Mark had moved out of state, started over. Meanwhile, I was drowning. The neighborhood shunned me. The school moms whispered about me. I lost my job because people didn't want to work with a woman who had lied about her own children's father. Even the kids, real fathers, wanted nothing to do with them. Connor, the gym trainer, vanished. The real estate guy told me to never contact him again. Emma's dad blocked my number. I was left with 3 broken children, no money, and no way out. Now, a year later, we live in a tiny apartment on the other side of town. The kids don't talk about Mark much anymore, but I see it in their eyes, they miss him. And the worst part, I know he'll never come back. It's been a year. A year since Mark walked away and never looked back. A year since I lost everything. And yet somehow I'm still here. But I'm not the same person I was before. Our new life is smaller, quieter. The kids share a cramped apartment instead of the big house they used to love. No more private schools, no more fancy vacations. Just us, struggling to make ends meet. Some days, I catch Mason staring at the old baseball glove Mark bought him, his fingers tracing the stitches like it's a relic from another life. Some nights, Emma still asks me, when is Daddy coming home? And Tyler? He doesn't speak to me at all. I used to tell myself that none of this was my fault, that I did what I had to do, that if Mark had just paid more attention, if he had been there for me instead of working so much, maybe I wouldn't have done what I did. But deep down, I know the truth. I did this. I built my life on lies, and when the truth came out, it burned everything to the ground. The worst part. I don't even know if I regret the cheating. I regret getting caught. I regret losing control. I regret hurting my kids. But do I regret those nights, those moments where I felt seen, wanted, alive? I don't know. Maybe that makes me a bad person. Maybe I always was. People love to talk about karma, about how cheaters always get what's coming to them. Maybe they're right. I used to be the woman people envied, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the one who had it all. Now, I'm the woman they whisper about. The homewrecker, the liar, the woman who lost everything. Mark has moved on. I heard through the grapevine that he's living in the mountains somewhere, running his own business, healing. Meanwhile, I'm drowning in bills, working 2 jobs, barely keeping it together. They say the truth sets you free. But I've never felt more trapped. One day, maybe my kids will forgive me. Maybe they'll understand that I never meant to hurt them. Maybe they won't. All I know is I made my choices. And now I have to live with them. Every single day. So what do you think? Was I wrong? Did I deserve everything that happened? Or do you think Mark should have stayed for the kids? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts. And if you love shocking real-life stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because trust me, the next story is even crazier.